Welcome to the session. First, I always like to start a little bit high level. So maybe you can just talk about, I guess, how Inmode was founded, and let's discuss how your products are fundamentally different than some of the other lasers and more commoditized aesthetic products that are out there.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having us. Yeah, a little bit of background. Inmode started about 15 years ago by two veterans in the aesthetic space. Our two co-founders, Moshe Mizrahi, the CEO, and Dr. Michael Crandall, the CTO. Worked for many years in the aesthetic space. Used to work for ESC, that later on became Luminis, and after that co-founded Cineron, that later on became Cineron Candela. The main reason they decided to start Inmode is that they wanted to create this paradigm shift in the aesthetic space. They felt at the time that the aesthetic space is saturated with many laser devices, to the extent that laser became a commodity. Because laser has been around for many years, there were not too much patent protections around it. A lot of players from Asia and Eastern Europe entered the market. Cost of lasers, the price of lasers, ASPs of lasers went down, while cost of manufacturing a laser still remained fairly high because it's an optical energy. It's a very expensive energy to work with. So they decide to take a different approach and focus on a different type of energy, which is radio frequency, and specifically bipolar radio frequency. They came to the conclusion that with bipolar radio frequency you can penetrate deeper and achieve better outcome, especially when it comes to body or face shaping, rather than any light-based energy. Another change of direction that they took is focus on minimally invasive procedures. At the time, most of the light-based procedures focused on non-invasive, and what we believed and later on identified as a trend is that patients prefer to have something that is more invasive as long as they get better results. So if you, at the time, you had either non-invasive light-based procedures or full surgical procedures. And there was a huge gap in between, and this is exactly the gap that Inmode decided to go after, capturing those patients that want something more substantial done in terms of efficacy and results, but didn't want to because of all the risk associated with full surgery, or because they were just healthy fear of surgical procedures. So going into this market with minimally invasive and with a different type of energy seems to be the right way to go. It differentiated us from everything out there and helped us capture this small niche, which is not so small and not so niche, of patients that want better results without going completely under the knife.
Very good. Yeah. So I think you illustrated that point a lot about the treatment gap and how, on the one hand, you have non-invasive technologies that may not be too effective. On the other side of things, you have more expensive, invasive surgeries that can get you a great result, but you're going to have downtime. You might have anesthesia, those kind of things. So you're squarely in the middle. And maybe talk about how big that niche is, because it is a big niche.
It is. In theory, any person between the age of 35 to 65 would probably prefer to get a treatment or procedure with substantial results, but would be afraid, their skin condition is not bad enough to justify a full surgical procedure. What we offer is an in-office procedure under local anesthesia, fairly minimal downtime, yes? So the traditional laser companies were talking about that patients are looking for lunch break procedure. That you can go in the middle of your day, do a quick procedure, and come back to the office. We kind of took a different approach. We are talking about weekend procedures. You can do the procedure on Friday, go back to the office on Monday. The results are substantial. Patients are completely fine with this kind of fairly minimal 48 hours downtime. Yes, it's more than lunch break procedure, but it's not the 2 weeks downtime that requires this full surgical procedure.
Great. Maybe we could now go a level down and talk about some of the key product categories. You mentioned the bipolar RF, two of the biggest platforms that the company came out with. First were BodyTite and FaceTite. So can you talk about, how bipolar is different than some of those other energies, your protection on it, and how BodyTite and FaceTite are still growing or have room for growth?
Excellent question. So yeah, our flagship technology was the RFAL that you mentioned, BodyTite and with the BodyTite and FaceTite, and also the Morpheus 8 is a very popular product for us. The advantage of bipolar radio frequency, unlike some companies monopolar radio frequencies. Once you have two electrodes conducting the treatment, you can control the energy better. And once you have better control of the energy, it changes everything. It changes the efficacy and the safety of the procedure, which is the two most important elements when you come to treat patients. RFIL, very successful product, launched in 2016, 2017. I think probably will be due for some kind of a refresh of our next generation soon in the next year or two. Still for a product that is out there for so many years, very strong brand name, still maintaining high ASPs. The beauty is in the simplicity of this technology, of the bipolar RF mechanism of action. You have two cannulas, two electrodes, one of the cannula that goes in internally, inside the fat layer, and basically melts the fat from the inside, for lack of a better term. And then you have another electrode, larger in diameter, so the heat concentration is lower, sits on the skin, and at the same time contract the skin. So, and why is it's important? Because killing fat is one thing, and it's important, but if you kill fat and don't do anything about the skin, you end up with sagging, looking like skin, loose skin. So the ability to do it at the same time, kill the fat and contract the skin, it's like shrink wrapping the body part that you are treating, and that's basically the holy grail when it comes to plastic procedures.
So two for one.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of things I'd like to talk about. One is the pipeline and the fact that the companies continue to innovate and come out with a cadence of products that we've seen be very successful. So last year they started launching a women's health platform called Empower. I think your initial guidance was 20 million and you did 45. So I think most people would call that a successful launch year. Maybe you could start by discussing Empower, what you see the market opportunity being like for that and how that could continue to grow over time.
Yeah, that's a great question. Overall, before we talk about Empower specifically, Empower was part of our more strategic approach to increase our offering from aesthetic to what we call wellness, and by doing that, attract more providers into the aesthetic world. So, for example, Empower is our offering for women health provider. It has several handpieces to treat several women health related issues. It has 3 handpieces to treat for vaginal treatment, and that can help with improving sexual dysfunction, treating SUI, stress urinary incontinence, and also sort of women-related issues. But in addition, we also have some aesthetic applicators on the Empower device. And what we found is that many of the owners of Empower actually using the Empower also for aesthetic device. And we ran some statistics and we found out not only that on every vaginal consumable that they purchase for the Empower, they buy 2 aesthetic consumable for the same device. So that means that this concept is working, us attracting more players into the aesthetic world. And it makes sense, nowadays it's very hard for physicians and practice owners to grow the practice just by going after reimbursable procedures. If they really want to grow their practice, they may want to start offering some cash-based procedures, and I would argue there is no best cash-based procedure for them to offer rather than aesthetic. And we see that it's working for them. It makes sense. The patient is coming in, it's the right demographic. They coming in to get vaginal treatment, and then the doctor talk to them and upselling them an aesthetic treatment.
Maybe that's important to kind of double click on because the pool of OBGYNs in the U.S. is very large, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that you're starting to get some of that pull through, I think, is significant. And we could transition that into you're launching this year the ophthalmology platform.
Right.
So another relatively large pool of physicians. Can you describe what's in that platform and maybe whether you'd expect to see the same kind of pull through success with those doctors?
That's exactly the idea. Again, the ophthalmology group is not as big as OBGYN, but still it's a nice sizable group. And the idea is the same thing. We are going to this community with a platform that has 2 handpieces to treat dry eye. One is IPL based and one is non-invasive radiofrequency based. Again, we did some initial launch of this product in Canada last year. I will be speaking to some Canadian doctors, and what I hear is that actually the combination of IPL and RF is really working great and better than anything they've ever seen. The only thing that is out there in the market is only IPL-based solution. We are going to be the first one that's going to bring 2 type of energy to treat the dry eye. But as we did with the Empower, we are going to have also aesthetic applicators on this device. and hoping that at some point those ophthalmologists or optometrists would upsell and start offering aesthetic procedures to the patient, because the patient is coming in to treat their dry eye, but it's very almost intuitive to start talking to them about the wrinkles around the eyes, and hey, I have a new device the same device that helps you with the dry eye can help you with the wrinkles or some brown spots over your face. So technically they can do a full Morpheus 8, a full fractional RF treatment to the face. So we are hoping that, yes, the same way we saw that working and playing out with the women health providers, hopefully with the ophthalmologists and optometrists would work the same way.
And I know that's launching soon here. Can you talk about how much of that is in the guidance and maybe compare ophthalmology and that opportunity to women's health?
Obviously, in terms of opportunity, the Envision is not as big as Empower, and it's too early for us to talk about size of market. Don't forget, when we launched the Empower, we had a lot of experience with this product or with this space already, and also many of our sales reps came from some companies that used to sell to OBGYN before, so we had a lot of in-house experience on how to target and what to do with the women's health market. With ophthalmology, it's a new market for us that we are kind of learning as we go. We are also trying something new for the first time for us. We are hiring in some territories in the US sales reps that are fully dedicated to sell only Envision. And that's something that we didn't do before. So far, all of our products that we had was mainly products that we allowed all the sales team to sell. And now we are bringing a sales team that is fully dedicated to sell only a single product. So to answer your question, because it's a new space for us and because we are trying some new go-to-market strategies here, I think, and it's a soft launch this year, I think the contribution of Envision to the top line this year would be somewhat limited. We don't count on too much, but I believe later on the year, once we see how our experiments played out, we'll be in a better position to talk about how this opportunity might look like.
And maybe specifically on guidance, I know at various points you've talked about having scaled the organization to grow around $70 million on an absolute basis. I think the initial midpoint this year was 72 or 73 or something like that. How should we expect that to evolve going forward? Can you talk about the additional pipeline products and or how you may grow SG&A to be able to change that equation over time?
Sure. So in terms of innovation, this is one of the most things that's important for us. I believe that our R&D is the most innovative R&D team in the space. We are able to bring to the market, on average, 2, some years even 3 new platforms or technologies. And this is important, and looking at our R&D pipeline, we believe we can continue to sustain that in the next foreseeable future. So taking that, bringing 2 new platforms to or 2 new technologies every year, together with increasing the sales team, I think that's kind of the formula that we had in place, that we know that it's working and should be able to help us with bringing $70 million additional incremental revenue every year. So we have a formula to get that done. Yes, this space, the aesthetic space, is very heavy on sales and marketing, less so much on G&A, mostly sales and marketing, and we definitely we plan to continue to spend or invest, the way I look at it, in the next couple of years in expanding our sales and marketing efforts in order to continue to take market share and in order to expand to all those new categories that we go to. We are now going after new type of physicians, ophthalmology and optometry. It's a new community that we want to develop relationship with. We have more conferences now to go to. Ophthalmologist conferences that we didn't go to before. So all these things, cost money, but I don't look at it as spending, as more of investing in order to be able to grow and take market share.
Got it. Okay. So maybe I'll ask a couple more and see if anybody in the audience wants to ask anything here at the end. I guess one thing I'd like to ask you about is when you think about Inmode, one of the hallmarks is your margins and the cash flow. And I think some of that is the innovation and the pricing that you talked about. Some of that is, Moshe's not here, so we can talk about him. The CEO is very frugal, right? But maybe discuss your ability to sustain those high margins in the 80s and the 40s, basically, as you move forward. And then what might you do with the cash flow and the cash you're building?
Good question. Yes, listen, this is part of the DNA of the company. We are kind of a lean and mean, has a lean and mean mentality, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Moshe would never approve to bring to the market a product that they will not demonstrate to him that at the drawing board we will be able to achieve more than 80% gross margin. So we will kill it right there. So it's profitability is very important for us. and luckily we have the R&D team to support that. I've been asked this question about sustainability of margins for 4 or 5 years now, and these are the margins. We don't see a scenario where we are going to experience a significant decrease in margin as long as the demand is there. In terms of cash, yes, we keep generating cash, and a lot of it every year. The priority right now this year would be, or so far this year, was to try to look to some strategic M&A. But as I mentioned, we have a very innovative R&D team. We don't need to do M&A in order to continue to grow. So we can be very picky and very responsible with what we acquire, if any. And if we see that we cannot find anything, we probably are not going to just generate cash forever and sit on it. We will give it back to the shareholders in some way of either buyback or dividend. But the first priority right now is M&A. Once we see that we conclude that process for us, if we could not find anything, we can definitely try the buyback or dividend route.
Great. So let's see if anybody has a question from the audience. Would anybody like to ask one here in the few minutes that we have left? I think we're like over 3 today. All right, so let me keep going. The other thing I think is a hot topic these days is recession. So maybe you could just talk about the trends that you've seen. Have you seen any impact yet? And how much sensitivity should we expect for consumers to have to your products given there may be a mild or a moderate recession?
Oh, that's a great question. We don't see any slowdown or any signs of recessions coming in. I've been asked about recession for several quarters now. We are not afraid of a recession. Looking at what happened with COVID, I think it's a good indication to what would happen during a recession. We have a very strong balance sheet, a very profitable company. If there will be a recession, I'm sure we will be able to go through it and come out much stronger on the other side. That in fact might create some opportunity for us. There are some players in the space that are barely break even, and then that might be opportunity for us to gain more market share, as well as that might also create some M&A opportunities for us. What I've seen in the past with recessions in the aesthetic space, people talk about maybe 20% drop in revenue. Again, that's not something that concerns us at all. Obviously, we're not a recession-proof company, but if a recession would come, we definitely can pull through it.
Well, some of the it's questionable whether they're actually competing, but some of the other companies in the aesthetic space have struggled with execution issues, with different things of late. Can you talk about whether disruption at those companies can give you any opportunity to hire or pull talent?
We hire talent from the competition and from outside the industry all the time, regardless whether there's a specific challenge with one of the competitors or not. In terms of gaining market share because some of the competitors having some challenges, in theory, maybe. If a physician has only $120,000 to spend in a single year and the competitor has some serious challenges, so maybe let's direct them towards us. But that's something that's very hard for me to measure. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. So the last thing I'll ask you about is you mentioned the longer-term pipeline products beyond ophthalmology. Could you just remind us specifically some of the platforms that Dr. Kreindel and the team are working on?
Sure. We are working on some new devices to expand to new areas like ENT. We are looking into some snoring and turbinated reduction procedures. But again, that might take time. Erectile dysfunction platform. But again, that's only at the beginning of the R&D phase. But we don't forget that we are an aesthetic company and we are looking into more aesthetic procedures. Next generation of some of our legacy products. You mentioned BodyTite, FaceTite, Optimus. These are products that were with us for many years, 7-8 years now. So probably a next generation is due sometime soon, and we don't neglect or forget the aesthetic. We are an aesthetic company at the end of the day. And even some of the existing products, Empower Women Health, we are looking into some additional indication and additional handpieces for the women health, maybe around HPV, overactive bladder, and things like that the R&D team is working on. So yeah, exciting times.
All right, very good. I think we're about out of time. Do you want to get a last one in?
How is the launch of Forma iSight and unfolded? Is competition with dry eye spacing therapeutics concerning in the US?
So it actually went very well. The combination of the Forma and with the IPL device, I think the feedback that we received was really, really good, and we'll see how things plays out in the US. That's why we downplay the expectation. It's a learning curve for us, but I'm excited about it. Based on the feedback that I heard from Canadian doctors, I'm really excited about it.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for your interest in Inmode today, and on to the next session.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.